We acknowledge the original owners of the land on which we podcast, whose stories were told for thousands of years. Today, we are recording in Meanjin. We pay our respects to elders past and present who may be listening. Sovereignty was never ceded. A quick note before we get started that there may be some swearing in today's podcast. If you don't like swearing or usually listen with children in the car, you have been warned. This episode of What in the NDIS Now is brought to you by Astalty. Astalty is the software solution for NDIS professionals built by NDIS professionals. Astalty is my go-to software, and Astalty is trusted and loved by hundreds of other NDIS providers. I love how easy it is to use and how it keeps all my participant information, notes, and invoicing all in one place, available to me anytime from any device. Sign up now for your 14-day free trial. Head to astalty.com.au to sign up now. See for yourself how much easier managing all your NDIS business needs are by using Astalty. Thanks again to Astalty for sponsoring today's episode. You're listening to What in the NDIS Now, a podcast where I, Hannah Redford, and my friend Sam Rosenbaum interview participants and providers about all things NDIS. Hey Sam, how you going?
Yeah, really well, thanks, Hannah. How about yourself?
I am doing really well.
That's great.
And we're both back.
We are, and on our first official back together episode since I was not there for the Storm recording. I'm sorry, Storm, but great episode. Love your work.
Yes.
But what I am most happy about at the moment is that I am feeling like summer is on its way and things are getting brighter and things are getting warmer. I just feel by the time summer's hit, I'm going to be not liking it.
Always. I hate humidity. Why do I live in Queensland?
Well, because the hot, horribleness of Victoria, when summer hits in Victoria, you know it's summer because you're breathing in fire.
Sure. Sam, I've got a joke for you.
Bring it, Hannah.
What do you call an alligator who is a private detective?
What do you call an alligator that is a private detective? I'm terrible at jokes. What do you call I don't know, Hannah. What do you call an alligator that is a private detective?
An investigator.
Well, maybe I should talk to HR about who we're hiring next. But speaking of HR and changes and new developments, Hannah, we have some news.
We do. We've joined forces finally.
It has been a long time coming, and thank you and welcome.
Yes.
So, Hannah, what are you doing with me?
I have joined Provider Advisory Services, and I am primarily working with you on a special project called Provider Optimisation Pathways.
Yeah, I am very excited, and this is something I've been working towards for a really long time, and a cumulative of the last 5 years worth of consulting work and business sort of work.
Yeah, and one of the things I'm really enjoying working for you / with you and sometimes joking with you, saying, hey boss, let's do this or that. But of course, both of us being neurodivergent, it's nice to know that it's okay if something neurodivergent or the way I talk gets a bit wonky, and then we always figure it out.
That is, and we have quite a bit of day, as I said a bit of it earlier. My day got flustered by toast.
Yes. What happened to your toast?
It got burnt. But it was the love and care that it was bacon toast, and I made bacon oil toast, and I did it nice. I was making bacon, and I soaked it in the oil. And sorry, Ellie, our producer, who's a vegan, I'm going to stop talking about this. Anyway, the point being is I really wanted that toast, and the toast got burnt, so the toast got thrown out. And that did.
Oh.
The sun is out, Hannah. Let's focus on the positives, because we need some positive in this industry, and that's what we're looking at doing as part of the pathway, which is all about bring it back to the people and people experience.
Sam, do you want to take us through a little bit about what the Provider Optimisation Pathway looks at for providers?
Yeah. I've noticed especially the last 2 years, is that the sector has forgotten that we're a people-based service business, delivery business. We're not necessarily NDIS providers. Yes, we are NDIS providers, but we first and foremostly are a business. And I think this whole NDIS provider has kind of gaslit us into forgetting that we're meant to be a business and we're doing service-based business. So what I did with the pathway is brought it back to the people, and that's your leadership, your employee, and your consumers. So your leadership is what steers the business, how you guide that, what your ethics are, what your quality management sort of looks like, what your financial stability is a real big element as well with that. Because with the leaders of that fundamental thing, they train most of your staff when they first walk in. It's how we're supporting that to then support the staff, which is the employee experience. And that starts with the first sort of, hey, come join me for the business partner position, or your support worker, or I'm looking for a support coordinator, sort of ad at Seek or Facebook or wherever that might be. And that's the start of your employee experience. And then how does that follow through from the training to onboarding to when you introduce them to the consumer? And that comes from your leadership sort of point and the onboarding point that's looked at what's that information that you capture from the consumer at the very start of the consumer life cycle, and how does that go and transpond to build out the service delivery and help inform your staff, and then help inform your leadership from a quality management point of view, because it's meant to be an all-inclusive circle. We're meant to do quite well because that's what we're meant to be, is service-based businesses.
Yeah, and I really love this because it also gives providers a scorecard. So you have numbers against all of these things that tells you, are you doing this bit really well and then this bit really poorly? Because there are definitely things everyone's doing really well, or you wouldn't be in business, right? And so let's quantify that, but let's also see the bits that maybe you could be doing better.
100%.
So you've then got all these numbers, a big scorecard, as we're calling it. And then at the end of the process, you have this big, beautiful report that has all of the recommendations as well as all your scores. And then we can help you implement those recommendations, or you've got the report, it's your report, you can implement it yourself as well. So that makes it really helpful.
Yeah, definitely, because it is very similar to an audit, but it's not an audit. We do look at a lot of the stuff that an NDIS the auditor would look like from a registration point, but that's to help look at, if we're from a project point, if you're wanting to go registration, what do you need for registration down the track if that's the pathway that you're wanting. And it's also a fundamental part of your leadership, whether you're not going to be registered, or depending on what the agency does down the commission, I guess, but everyone's going to get registered at some point in time based on what's being said. But it's a data-driven insight assessment tool. As you say, we get scorecards, and then that leads and drives what we kind of recommend for. We have had some providers come through and on the early days with the assessment, and you could see that they were not registered providers, but they had really strong workplace culture. The staff were really strong in their knowledge base. So it showed that from a HR and a leadership point, there was thought put into who they're bringing on and the skills that they're bringing in. So when they were working, it was just part of that everyday practice already with the people they had in the business. So it wasn't necessarily something that had to grow from scratch. Or with some of the support work businesses that we've had through there, they've had really good sort of consumer-based outcomes and that, but they were really bad on the workplace documentation, so onboarding. Most support coordinators on here will agree. It's all about reacting and just getting stuff done as quickly as we possibly can for the participants. And it was just, you can see that when you on board with some support coordination businesses, that it's just very participant-centric driven, which is fantastic. But it's also part of the reason why you've got such burnout from support coordinators, because it's under-supported.
That's all really important. So we've sort of explained what it is, why you might need it, why it's awesome. So let's explain how we get the data and a bit more about what the Provider Optimisation Pathway actually is. The Provider Optimisation Pathway is a process of 5 steps. We work with you to gather information about your business leadership experience, employee experience, and consumer experience. The results of this investigation are then offered to you as a pathway to optimizing your service. You may choose to implement our recommendations yourself, or we can continue to work with you through the implementation process. Let me break down for you, Sam, so you know that I know what I'm talking about. Each step of the pathway. We hold an initial meeting with you to gather data about your business and explain more about the pathway. So for now, I'll run you through the oversimplified version. If you want a bit more detail, we will have a copy of our brochure in the show notes along with a link to the website. Our first stage, we look at your business as a whole to understand the why and the how. At this first step, we look at the leadership experience at your organisation. The data gathered at this step gives us insight into your risk management and incident management process. We also look at how you handle feedback and complaints and assess your quality management systems. Data gathered here can be utilised towards building your business growth and community engagement. The second stage will analyse your human resource systems and how you attract and retain employees. This is the employee experience. This is analysis done by sending a survey to your employees. We look at your employee onboarding, training, and supervision processes. We also assess your company culture, employee benefits and retention, organisational health and safety, fair work, and award compliance, which we all know is super difficult. While your employees are filling in that survey, we will work on the third stage, consumer experience. Here, we look at the consumer journey and how you engage and increase your services. We send out a survey to your consumers to gather data about the consumer experience. This survey looks at the participant referral and intake process of your business. We also gather information about service delivery satisfaction. The data here gives us an insight into your support capacity and growth opportunities, improvements that could be made to support implementation and ensure that your processes of support and care planning are amazing. The fourth stage of the pathway is the pathway presentation. Here, we present the diagnostics and results and work with you towards your pathway success. We call the results of our assessment and analysis our assessment and opportunity report. Here you are presented with a business scorecard which outlines strengths and weaknesses across the 3 experience areas. We provide recommendations and opportunities to enhance operations and sustainability. The 5th stage of the pathway is implementation. At the 5th stage, you can then use the recommendations provided to improve your business and your service. We can work with you to implement these, or you may choose to carry out the implementation yourself.
This is a tool that we go for look at people that really want to understand what's happening in their business and how to go the next mile and grow with the changes that we talk about all the time on this podcast, with the NDIS changes coming up, with what's happening in government. And we haven't even started talking about thriving kids, Hannah. Where is the rest of the foundational support?
So that, in a nutshell, is the Provider Optimisation Pathway. Now, if you'd like more information, please come and have a chat with me. I'm always excited to talk to you over Teams because I also had a fall recently and hurt my knee, so I'm all on the virtual coffees and cake. So please make sure that you do that. Which thank you to Alicia Gillespie this morning. She did bring her own coffee and cake, and I thought it was very funny.
Oh, we love that. Good on you, Alicia.
Now that we've told you a bit about Provider Advisory Service and what I'm up to in the world and what Sam's business is up to in the world, we want to talk to you a little bit about some NDIS news that's happening, which Sam has already alluded to with thriving kids. So, Sam, let's get your take and then we can get my take, and we might be here for the next little while because I have some opinions about this.
Oh, mate, mate, mate. Oh, mate, Mark Butler, what the fuck? Thriving Kids is essentially Mark Butler's kind of telling everyone in the sector, fuck you, I am just going to ignore everything that's happened over the last 3 years and come out and rebrand foundational supports for young autistic kids as Thriving Kids with no plan, no foresight, no actual real documentation, and just kind of going, I'm going to take control of this because I can't engage or communicate with the states and territories to negotiate a proper plan to deliver proper foundational support to support the fact that I'm trying to push down the expense load, the budget from NDIS plans without worrying about how much I'm spending on legal fees to stop ART reviews. I've got lots of feelings and thoughts.
If you have some words for that rather than sounds, that would be useful. But okay, let me tell you about my thoughts. I have a lot of problems with when governments silo off services because inevitably it's problematic.
You're absolutely right. It is problematic. And the problems stem from the fact that he didn't consult with any of the states about this before he made the announcement. He didn't speak with any of the industry bodies or any of the co-design forums that are meant to have happened because of the changes that this government brought in under the NDIS bill
2.0.
It's once again a demonstration from this government to decide to say one thing but outrightly go against the foundations of what they agreed and said to.
I agree. And all of this is probably because we've also had the Disability Royal Commission, and that found a lot of things that he's completely ignored. And every time the government silos off support, people fall through gaps because it creates gaps in services. One of the issues you've got is things like if you're a child with physical disabilities and then you also happen to have autism, does that mean the NDIS can't accept it? And so now you've got to use two different systems?
That is a clear problem that came out of the lack of information and the lack of paper and the lack of consultation that Mark Butler took in coming out with that press club speech. It demonstrates this government's inability to learn from every failure in government from the last 10 years.
Or 100 years.
NDIS years.
The other problem is, the biggest overarching problem, of course, is that autism is a lifelong disability. You don't stop having autism at 7 or 9 or whatever arbitrary number they're picking just because you got some OT while you were young. Like, fuck me.
But wait, Hannah, President Trump is going to save us and cure it.
Because Tylenol is the reason that autism is so prevalent. Yeah, right.
There's definitely lots of problems there, but at least one thing that has sort of popped back in very recently, moving back into some good news, is we've got a bit of an outcome on what they're doing with art therapy.
That's true. So they appointed Dr. Stephen Duckett to do a review into art and music therapy to see if there is actually scientific evidence to say that art and music therapy does support people who have disabilities and that there can be positive outcomes, measurable outcomes. Okay, so he actually released his report to the minister, and the minister for a few weeks refused to say what was in that report or release it to the public, which was horrifying and shows how truly not transparent this government is. Anyway, they did end up releasing it and they said, oh, yeah, right. So there is enough evidence, and actually, so now we're going to continue to have music and art therapy as long as the music therapist or the art therapist is registered with their appropriate bodies and has a master's in music therapy or art therapy. They now will charge the $163 that counsellors are allowed to charge. So this is a huge reduction in what they were allowed to charge before. And this is people who have master's level qualifications. And so I think this is a really great. I'm so glad they've decided to, yes, bring it back. But the reduction in how much they're allowed to charge means it will be very difficult for those people to actually make a living. And this brings me to, we were on hiatus when the pricing arrangements and new pricing limits document came out. And of course, it was drama in our sector. And for good reason. I don't mean that in a negative way. The fact that support coordination and allied health professionals were kicked and so were plan managers is just disgusting. And I'm also so upset for physios because they got bumped down. They got a reduction, not an increase, but they got a reduction. And it's a bigger reduction if you lived in South Australia, Northern Territory, Western Australia, because then it's a $40 reduction rather than just a $10 reduction that is on the East Coast. So this has been huge. And then, of course, there's the issue of allied health professional travel, which now they can only charge 50% of their fee for travel. This is problematic because it's still their time, and their time is worth money. They still have to pay their staff. They still have to pay insurance. They still have to pay their APRA registration. They still have to pay all of these things. And now they've got this huge reduction. So this has been a real hit to our sector recently.
And it does raise some questions around the decision-making process from the NDIA, where they're pulling this, what the government is also doing as well behind closed doors. There is just, and that on the whole transparency note, we've also got a government that's actively trying to make it harder for freedom of information requests to be made.
Yeah.
This is a government that went on a rampage over the previous government and the current opposition around transparency, and went cutthroat around when any of the former ministers were even closely stepping out of line. And now we're like I've said that we're feeling very like Abbott Turnbull-esque days at the moment. It doesn't feel like we've progressed with a government that actually built their foundations for what we've advocated for what Bill Shorten was actually driving before he decided to tap out. And after this review, that hasn't actually seemed to really make a headway, because the government has yet to actually respond to a single recommendation other than through private means and mechanisms that we're not quite sure on if they are or not doing that. We can read through the lines, we can see what they're doing in budget papers, we can see how they're doing it in transacting, in how they're engaging with providers, with participants, with the sector, with the terms of engagement from the review and stuff happening now, because we're also meant to be having consultations for the following Bill number 2, Act number 2. For the next set of Bill number 2 for the next set of changes for the NDIS Act. And that's meant to set the foundations and the pathway for the rest of the stuff from the rest of the change work and the legislation that was meant to happen from the NDIS review. We're several years later down the track and lots of action happening, and we're still no clearer on what the government's actually wanting to do today than ever before.
Exactly. So what they've done, to explain to people who might not have heard about this, they're now going to charge people for FOIs, whereas previously it was free to apply for an Freedom of Information document. So what Freedom of Information, what that does, when you make a Freedom of Information request, you have to be very specific about what you're asking the government for. And usually it's around, what's on my file, which should be your information anyway. But recently I've heard of like the FOI about how much the government is spending on lawyers for the Administrative Review Tribunal.
That was a bombshell.
Yeah, so we can move on to that bit. So anyway, that's what's happening in FOI land. Then the next thing we did want to talk about, and we're segueing nicely into, is that the National Disability Insurance Agency paid $60.7 million to 6 external law firms between 2024 to 25 to represent the agency at the Administrative Review Tribunal. Now, this is up from $37 million the previous year. So this is huge. Now, this is also due to the dramatic uptick in the number of cases going to ART. So if you have a look at that, in the 12 months to the end of June 2025, there were 7,132 new cases brought before the ART. This is a 76% increase on the year before. 76% increase, Sam. This is huge. It is also creating a massive backlog. So it means that cases at ART are taking so much longer to get through. And that is a huge, huge problem for participants trying to fight for the supports that they need.
It just compounds in on the waste that we have in the sector, from just a money toll, a human, and the humanity toll as well on the people that the lawyers having, like, sure, lawyers, we joke that they don't have a heart and they're just doing it for the money, but like, you can't necessarily say someone's got to do it at the end of the day, but that can't necessarily be good. You've got the participants and the family members that are stuck in that rigmarole and have to fight for what they need and what they should be able to get more often than not. And before we were talking, we raised this point around the numbers, how much of this is around the agency trying to cull back over high value plans that may not need that money in it, and people that sort of get whether or not it's needed. And as you said, that's what the ART, the tribunal's for, is to make that decision. But yeah, it's just, why are we wasting so much time playing the fight game and money when it could be actually invested in building out proper foundational supports so parents and participants weren't scared of what's coming?
Yeah, look, the other problem is that a lot of the lawyers that the NDIA are employing are barristers. So us mere mortals can't have legal representation because most of the time we can't afford it. And we have to then look through forms and evidence from a barrister who writes in legalese, and we have to try and talk to them, and it makes it a very adversarial.
Well, they're trained to be a lawyer. That's what they're trained to pull it apart and to annihilate what the government, or pull back the money that the government's trying to save, and it's gross.
Yeah.
Do feel like they're just doing their job at the end of the day, and if I'm paying them to do that money, I want them to have that as an effect. But that's not what I want my tax-paying money to go do. That's not what, as taxpayers, we should be angry and frustrated that rather than trying to nip the waste and the spending, we're spending this kind of money. Because if you also look at the Auditor General's Office, a report into the NDIA's board, which found that the governance and the oversight functions from the NDIA board is just not there. They're doing some of their markers that they should be from a governance point, but what actually really matters, where they should be asking the questions of the executives in the NDIS who are actually doing the day-to-day, because that's their job, is to ask questions of executives and go, what are you doing to improve this score for the participant charter? What are you doing to improve X, Y, and Z? Okay, good. I'm happy with you to do that. Let's move on. That's their job, is to quiz, and then they go to Senate estimates and they get quizzed. That's what they get paid for. But they're not even doing that. There's no structure. They do not have a defined structure at the governance level in the NDIA, where Kurt Finley and the rest of the team sit, because that's what, what? It's very hypocritical for the government to come after a lot of us providers and go, you're not doing this, when they can't even lead by example themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that report was shocking and horrifying, and I think that it's if you've got the time, it's worth a bit of a look. Can you say the name of that one more time for the listeners?
Yeah, so the There's quite a few number of reports from the Australian National Auditor's Office around different areas looking at the effectiveness of management and decision within the NDIS and also the Quality and Safeguards Commission. It lays it bare. As the Time Old saying says, you shouldn't throw rocks in glass houses, and the agencies shouldn't be coming after bad providers when they can't lead from a place of authority in the first place. But it also kind of goes into a bigger issue that we're seeing in the sector around governance, ethics, and what we're doing as a sector to minimize and minimize the exploitation and harm of the people that we're meant to be working for. It's part of the UN Charter of Rights with a Person with a Disability. It's part of our code of conduct for this sector. It's part of just being a good human. Yet we see providers that are outrightly exploiting the participants they're meant to be supporting, whether it be directly or indirectly. But there are lots of cases that we're seeing directly, and there are stuff that's happened. There was a very specific case on a current affair recently. You can go look it up. It's to do with a modelling agency. But from there, you can see that it raises some real questions around who we celebrate and who we work with as a whole and what we do when we see it. Because we're following that report and some stuff that has been posted on LinkedIn, you can see that there are quite some people that are very loud and quite proud to go, it's okay for someone to exploit a participant and we shouldn't go after them if they're just doing business. As I said, we're a person-centered service-based business at the start. We need to start remembering that at the end of the day, the people that we're supporting are people, and they're people with a disability. They're still people. So let's not do what we're all doing as a collective and just allowing it to happen, because bad things happen when good people let it happen. So we need to stop enabling it as a community. Otherwise, it's just going to keep on happening. And we all profess how much we don't like it and how it shouldn't be happening. But we're happy to let it stay happen. Stand up, people.
Absolutely. As we come to the end of this episode, I want to thank my darling children that you would have heard in the background. Well, they're teenagers, they're not children. You might have heard in the background of this podcast because it's school holidays when we're recording this. So I hope you all had fun also hearing them.
Surprisingly, compared to other days where we've been on video calls and stuff, I have not heard them as much as then. So it did make me want to join in on their game the other day. It sounded very enjoyable.
Yeah. Well, I know they're having lots of fun, so that's at least a good thing.
That's what a holiday is for. I want to grow young again and go back to school holidays and not have to worry about being an adult.
Oh, you couldn't pay me enough to go back to school. Far out.
Oh, it was just simpler. People told you where to be and what to do. And sometimes I think that I would just like that more. But anyway.
Make sure that you like and subscribe to the podcast in your chosen podcast app, or sometimes it's a follow button, because that helps us a lot.
And as always, the links will be in the show notes.
Until next time, bye.
Huzzah!
Thank you for listening. Please share with people you know. Until next time, as the Green Brothers say, don't forget to be awesome.